Raymond Black stood at the front of the sleek glass boardroom, every inch the golden boy. Behind him, a massive screen glowed with polished graphs, elegant charts, and glowing revenue projections, powered by a revolutionary AI model, or so he claimed. Executives from 5 major firms leaned forward, nodding intrigued. The future looked bright. Profits, power, praise. And Madeline Voss? She sat in the second row, silent, watching. She knew every number on that screen, every formula, every assumption, because she had built them. Not for accuracy, no. This time, she had built them to fail, carefully, methodically. Beautiful lies wrapped in logic. The kind of lies that don't scream, they whisper until it's too late. The model Raymond was selling for $50 million was about to implode. It wasn't rage that had brought Madeline here. It was something colder, more exact, the kind of precision that only years of being overlooked, dismissed, and used could create. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The silence she had learned can be louder than anything. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from today? And more importantly, have you ever watched someone steal your work and get rewarded for it? Leave a comment if this hits close to home. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. For 6 years, Madeline Voss came to work before the elevators got busy and left long after the last espresso machine shut down. She wasn't the type to linger in hallway chatter or laugh too loud in the break room. In fact, most people in the Denver office didn't even know which department she worked in. But the numbers did. Every major model that Lumaris Capital depended on, from risk forecasts to fraud detection systems, had her fingerprints all over it. She didn't brag. She didn't need to. Her value wasn't written on nameplates or performance reviews. It was buried deep in the lines of code that others built careers on. Madeline was the architect behind the curtain, the one they called when systems crashed at 2 a.m., or when the quarterly reports suddenly didn't match what the market expected. And she always showed up, quiet, precise, reliable. Her job title was Senior Algorithmic Analyst, but internally, she was known unofficially as the Fixer. Still, promotions passed her by. The feedback was always the same. Great work ethic, but not really leadership material. Needs to improve visibility, not client-facing. They never said it outright, but she understood what they meant. She didn't fit the mold. She didn't network over cocktails. She didn't play golf with the managing partners. She just delivered results, silently. Her office sat between the data room and an old archive closet. No windows, no distractions. Just a whiteboard covered in equations and 3 monitors humming quietly in the dark. And from there, she saw everything. Who was cutting corners, who was taking credit, who was rising too fast without substance. Madeline didn't speak up, not yet, but she was paying attention, especially on the day she noticed a new name being added to the Horizon Project roster, a name she didn't recognize, Raymond Black. She stared at the email for a long moment. Something in her shifted, not fear, not anger, but the unmistakable weight of knowing the storm was about to change direction. It started with a calendar invite, initial scope planning, Horizon AI infrastructure, time, Monday, 9 a.m., location, Executive Conference Room A, organizer, Juliet Merrick, CEO. Madeline blinked at the notification, then double-checked the attendee list. Her name was there, not as a technical observer, not in the CC line, but front and center. For a moment, she thought it might have been a mistake. She had worked at Lumaris Capital long enough to know her place, the background. Meetings like this weren't part of her routine. They were usually reserved for department heads, product leads, and polished presenters with firm handshakes and LinkedIn-friendly smiles. But Juliet Merrick was different. New to the company, but not new to results. Former VP at a top-tier hedge fund, known for turning around broken teams. Known for spotting underused talent. When Madeline entered the room that morning, she took a seat near the far end of the table out of habit. The room buzzed with nervous energy, analysts, directors, a few VPs murmuring about the Horizon contract, a massive deal, 8 figures. If executed well, it could put Lumaris on the map as a leader in predictive financial AI. Juliet walked in 5 minutes late. No apology, no fluster. She was calm in control, with a presence that silenced the room. She scanned the table once, then spoke. "This project will determine the next 5 years of this company's future," she said, "and it needs the best." She paused, then turned toward Madeline. "I've reviewed the internal performance logs. There's one person here who's quietly kept our systems from collapse more times than I can count." She looked Madeline straight in the eyes. "Madeline Voss will architect the data core for Horizon. Her work will form the backbone of everything we deliver." Madeline didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat tightened. In that moment, something cracked open inside her. Not pride, not excitement, something simpler. Hope. The kind that flickers fast and fragile, like a match in the wind. But even matches, given the right moment, can start a fire. She left the meeting in a daze, heart pounding, head spinning. For the first time in years, she wasn't just included, she was essential. But later that afternoon, another calendar invite appeared. Same project, new attendee, Raymond Black, Director of Strategic Initiatives. And just like that, the wind began to blow. Raymond Black arrived on a Wednesday. He didn't sneak in quietly or blend into the background like most new hires. No, he entered the Denver office like a man stepping onto a stage. Tailored navy suit, expensive shoes, a watch that gleamed too brightly under the overhead lights. His handshake was firm, his smile perfectly practiced. Even his laugh sounded like it had been tested in front of focus groups. People noticed. By noon, the office buzzed with speculation. Ivy League background, former strategist at some flashy fintech startup in New York. Rumor had it he once closed a $100 million deal in a single pitch. His official title was Director of Strategic Initiatives, but the word floating around was simpler, closer. The guy they brought in to make things happen fast or make someone else look slow. Madeline watched all of this unfold from her corner unnoticed. She listened quietly as her coworkers whispered near the coffee station. "He's got presence," one said. "He's gonna turn this place around," said another. Madeline said nothing. She had seen this pattern before. Style over substance. Buzzwords over backbone. People who knew how to speak, but not how to solve. She didn't judge him, not yet. Later that afternoon, Raymond stopped by her office. He didn't knock. "People like Raymond never knock. You must be Madeline," he said, leaning slightly against the doorframe, like he'd done it 1,000 times. "Juliet says you're the brain behind the machine." Madeline gave a polite nod. "I've got big plans for Horizon," he continued, flashing that polished smile. "And I'm glad to have a technical partner who can keep up." Then he was gone, just like that. No questions, no curiosity, just confidence. Madeline sat still for a moment. She had worked too long, seen too much to be fooled by charm. She didn't mind working in the shadows, but only if the spotlight wasn't built on stolen light. She turned back to her screen, but her mind kept circling one question. How do you partner with someone who only sees you as a tool? A question she wouldn't have to wonder about for long. At first, it was small, almost invisible. "Hey, Madeline, can you send me the updated API specs for Horizon's transaction model?" "No, please." No context. Just a Slack ping from Raymond, late at night, dropped between casual emojis and half-formed buzzwords. She replied promptly and professionally, like she always did. A few minutes later, he forwarded her work to the strategy team with no mention of her name. She told herself it didn't matter. It was part of the job. Behind-the-scenes work. That's how it had always been. Then came the second request. "I need your notes on the predictive logic for client churn," he typed. "Need it for a deck Juliet wants by 8 a.m. Still no thank you. Still no credit. By the end of that week, he had started forwarding full client emails to her inbox, marked only with 2 words at the top, Handle this." She didn't respond, not to him anyway. She just did the work, stored the files, and saved the logs. The shift was slow but undeniable. Raymond was everywhere, in every meeting, every email thread, every internal newsletter. He spoke confidently about our progress, using words she'd written and results she'd built. She watched him pitch their model to the CFO in a sleek conference room filled with sunlight, while she sat 2 floors below adjusting error thresholds and debugging recursive functions. What bothered her most wasn't the ego, it was the erasure, not just of her name, but of her voice, her intention, her care. He was turning the work into something it was never meant to be, a talking point, a shortcut to applause. And still, she stayed quiet. Not because she was afraid, but because she had learned something over the years. Erosion doesn't always break mountains. Sometimes it builds valleys. And if you watch long enough, you learn exactly where to plant the flood. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Raymond barged into Madeline's office without knocking again. He didn't even sit down. "I need access to the Horizon test environment," he said flatly. "Your folders, the internal models, everything. I'm pulling visuals for next week's investor preview." Madeline paused, hands hovering over her keyboard. "They're not finalized," she said carefully. "Some of the logic is still being refined. I wouldn't recommend. I just need the visuals," he cut her off, already pulling out his phone. "You're overthinking it." Then he was gone, leaving behind a faint trail of cologne and entitlement. That night, she stayed late. The office had emptied out. Only the quiet hum of the server room remained. On her 3rd cup of cold coffee, Madeline opened a new folder. She named it something simple, Horizon_visuals_final, and began to build. But these weren't her real models. They were reflections. Clean, professional, and convincing, but flawed in ways only a trained eye would catch. The growth curves looked perfect, but the source data had been reversed. The segmentation map was sleek, but the algorithm used logic from 5 years ago. Small things, but if left unchecked, they would collapse under scrutiny. And the best part? Each file was time-stamped, watermarked, and embedded with her digital signature, just subtle enough to be overlooked, just clear enough to prove authorship if needed. This wasn't sabotage, it was insurance. Madeline didn't raise her voice. She wrote code. She didn't send angry emails. She wrote scripts, simple ones, to track file access log downloads, and record changes. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm. Because this wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about regaining control inch by quiet inch. And as she zipped the folder and sent it to Raymond with a polite, "Let me know if you need anything else," she knew something had shifted. She was no longer standing in his shadow. She was building the stage beneath his feet. And he didn't even know the floor was starting to crack. Raymond didn't hesitate. The moment he received the folder, he dove in like it was a gift wrapped in gold foil. Within hours, Madeline's inbox buzzed with forwarded confirmations, internal reviews, client pitch decks, a press release draft. Her graphs, her models, her fake numbers all dressed up and headed straight for the spotlight. He didn't ask a single question, didn't double-check the logic, didn't pause to wonder why things looked a little too perfect. And that was the beauty of it. Madeline had crafted each file like a delicate trap, not with obvious mistakes, but with just enough distortion to tip the balance. A retention rate that looked encouraging at first glance, but used inverted metrics. A risk map that favored sectors Horizon had already exited. A revenue projection built with pricing data from outdated quarters subtly inflated through silent formulas buried 5 tabs deep. Digital poison. Not deadly by sight, but fatal when consumed without thought. And Raymond, he was swallowing it whole. Madeline watched from her quiet office as his name started popping up everywhere. Raymond Black's revolutionary AI projections, exclusive preview from Lumaris Capital's Rising Star. He had even submitted her visuals to the Investor Summit presentation team with his watermark plastered over her work. She didn't flinch. She documented everything. A background Python script recorded file access times, every download, every rename, every Slack message where he took credit. She made no accusations, no noise, just kept layering receipts like sediment, building a timeline that told the truth without ever saying a word. But what struck her most wasn't his arrogance. It was how confidently he trusted a foundation he didn't build, how easily he dismissed the quiet hands that held it up. By the end of the week, he had booked a private investor briefing. High stakes, high visibility. He called it a game-changer reveal. And Madeline, she simply added it to the log. Because now the question wasn't if the cracks would show, it was just a matter of when. The invitation went out on a Monday morning. Investor presentation, Thursday, 10 a.m., executive boardroom, 31st floor. Subject line, preview of Lumaris Predictive Intelligence led by Raymond Black. Madeline read it twice, then closed her laptop slowly. She already knew the contents of that presentation. She had built it, or rather, the version he would present, the version laced with quiet errors wrapped in confidence and broadcast under a name that wasn't hers. Still, it hit differently seeing it announced like that, so official, so public. Raymond didn't speak to her that day. He didn't have to. The silence between them had shifted. It was no longer absence. It was a boundary. He was too busy practicing holding impromptu meetings, parading his slides, polishing lines in front of mirrored glass. She caught glimpses of him in the hallway, nodding to directors, dropping buzzwords like transformative insights and disruptive modeling. Every phrase hollowed out a little more of the work it once stood for. Madeline stayed quiet, but she didn't stay still. Each evening after the noise died down, she backed up her files, the real ones, clean models. Accurate forecasts, transparent formulas. She printed the logs, labeled the metadata reports, annotated every file with version history. Nothing flashy, just the facts. By Wednesday night, the office was nearly empty. Madeline stood at the window of the analytics floor, looking down at the lights of downtown Denver. Her reflection stared back, tired, focused, resolved. This wasn't a trap anymore. It was a clock, and the hands were moving forward minute by minute toward impact. Thursday would come just like any other day, except this time someone was going to walk into a room full of executives and set fire to their own reputation without even realizing who handed them the match. The boardroom on the 31st floor was made of glass, steel, and quiet tension. 15 chairs circled a polished table, all filled with people who controlled numbers that shaped futures, investors, senior partners. Juliet Merrick sat at the head, calm, unreadable. A digital clock on the wall marked the seconds, though no one needed reminding. Everyone knew this presentation mattered. Raymond entered exactly on time, crisp in a dark gray suit, hair perfectly in place. He shook hands with ease, flashed his practiced grin, and connected his laptop to the main display. Madeline sat at the far end of the room, not at the table against the wall, laptop closed, leather portfolio resting on her knees. She wore the charcoal blazer she usually saved for interviews. No one looked twice. Raymond started with charm. "Thank you all for being here. What we're about to show you isn't just analysis, it's vision. Data-backed, AI-powered, market-ready insight." The first few slides landed smoothly. Generic overviews, clean charts, enough to earn nods from the room. Then came the projections. A 42% revenue increase in Q3, a 31% drop in client churn within 60 days. Market segments that hadn't been touched in years, now magically brimming with opportunity. Juliet leaned forward. "These numbers seem ambitious." Raymond's smile didn't fade. "Our model is based on advanced logic, trained on proprietary behavioral patterns. It's been thoroughly tested." A pause, then a voice from the left, one of the investors. "This forecast assumes a pricing elasticity that doesn't align with our latest data. Where did that coefficient come from?" Raymond hesitated. "It was derived from internal clusters." Another voice cut in. Your segmentation targets retirees in northern regions, but 72% of our growth is coming from urban professionals under 35. Is that reflected? Raymond blinked. Yes, the model accounts for shifting trends. The room quieted, and Juliet turned toward the wall. Madeline, she said gently, you reviewed the supporting models. Would you mind walking us through the methodology? Madeline looked up, calm, focused. She rose, slowly walked to the display, and reached for the HDMI cable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just said one sentence. I think it's time we looked at the real numbers. And with that, the screen flickered. The lie began to fall apart, and the truth was just getting started. The screen lit up again, but this time the colors were cooler, sharper. The graphs didn't soar, they curved modestly, backed by solid logic and labeled data sources. Madeline's version wasn't flashy, but it held. Let's start here, she said calmly, pointing to a modest 7.8% Q3 growth projection. This accounts for historical seasonality, price sensitivity, and regional demand. The previous version assumed uniform growth across all segments, which doesn't exist in real markets. The room went still. One of the investors leaned forward, scrolling through their tablet. These numbers align with our internal projections, they muttered, almost exactly. Madeline continued, flipping to the segmentation map. This reflects current behavior. 68% of purchases are driven by users aged 26 to 34. The model that was presented earlier used logic from a pre-2018 dataset. That group hasn't been dominant in years. Juliet narrowed her eyes. Are you saying the earlier model was based on outdated assumptions? Madeline didn't look at Raymond. She simply said, the data speaks for itself. That's when it started to unravel. A partner pulled up the investor deck on his phone. This version doesn't match what we received last week. An analyst chimed in, confused. Why are the retention rates flipped? Our premium churn is dropping, not climbing. Madeline remained composed. I documented both versions. Version history, metadata file access logs. Everything is time-stamped, traceable. The files I provided were preliminary drafts, marked not for distribution. Julia looked at Raymond. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence stretched, until finally Juliet spoke not as a CEO, but as a leader cutting through the noise. Mr. Black, she said firmly, you'll need to step outside. We'll continue from here. Raymond froze, then slowly walked toward the door. He didn't look at anyone, especially not Madeline. When it closed behind him, no one spoke for a long moment. Madeline felt something shift in the air, like a storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. Juliet turned back to her. Let's go over the full model, she said, from the beginning. And as Madeline opened her portfolio, her fingers steady, her voice calm, she knew something had ended, but something else was finally beginning. By the end of the day, the message was clear. An internal memo went out late Thursday afternoon, short and direct. Effective immediately, Raymond Black is no longer with the company. No explanation, no apology. Just the end of a name that had filled every meeting for weeks. But there was another update, one line tucked beneath the announcement. Madeline Voss will assume full leadership of the Horizon Initiative. She read it twice, then once more just to feel it land. No celebration followed, no confetti, no applause, just quiet acknowledgments, quick nods in the hallway, a few surprised smiles. But something had shifted in how they looked at her. Not with pity or doubt, but with something closer to recognition. The next morning, Madeline arrived early as always, except this time she didn't go to her usual desk on the analytics floor. Instead, she stepped into a new office. Glass walls, real sunlight, a door with her name on it, Director of Predictive Systems. Inside, she unpacked slowly. Just a laptop, a notepad, a framed photo of her parents, the only people who had ever understood why she worked the way she did. Quiet, relentless, purposeful. Her first move, she built a new team. Not by titles, but by trust. She reached out to those who had been overlooked, the ones whose insights were dismissed in meetings, whose code was buried under louder voices. Analysts, engineers, researchers, people like her. And in just a few days, something rare began to take shape. Momentum, real progress, honest collaboration. No one was jockeying for credit, they just wanted the work to be right. One afternoon, Juliet stopped by unannounced. "You built something solid here," she said. "Not just the model, the team." Madeline nodded. "It's easier when you stop trying to impress and just focus on the truth." Juliet smiled. "Funny how rare that is." As she left, Madeline turned back to her screen, a blank slate for their next phase. And just as she began typing, a new email pinged. The sender, Raymond Black. Subject line, "Coffee, just to talk." She stared at it. No reaction. Just silence. And then she hit archive. No reply. Some doors once shut are better left closed. But one window high above Denver stood wide open, and outside it, the future was finally hers to build. In the months that followed, the Horizon project launched without a hitch. The forecasts held. The client was thrilled. The models that Madeline and her new team built didn't promise miracles. They promised reality, actionable insights, measurable results. And when those results came in, quarter after quarter, no one had to guess who had made it happen. Raymond Black's name faded quietly. Last she heard, he'd taken a strategic advisory role at a much smaller firm out east. His LinkedIn went dark not long after. But Madeline didn't spend time thinking about him anymore. She had other things to build. She became a quiet force inside Lumeris. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. Respected. People came to her not just for answers, but for clarity. And that meant more than any title ever could. Sometimes she'd walk past her old cubicle, the one tucked between the data room and the archive closet, and pause for a moment. Not out of nostalgia, but out of recognition. That's where she learned how to disappear, and later how to return. The truth is, Madeline never wanted revenge. What she wanted was acknowledgement, integrity, the space to do her job right and have it matter. And maybe that's the real lesson here. You don't always need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes all it takes is precision and patience. Let people underestimate you. Let them overlook you. Just make sure they never forget what happens when they try to steal your voice, because eventually, truth has a way of rising, even if it starts in silence. And now I'm curious, have you ever been overlooked or underestimated, only to surprise everyone later? If so, tell me your story. You never know who might need to hear it.